I think what's kind of obvious is that crypto is a narrative driven market, right? And it's very cyclical. It's very possible to win a singular cycle, but it's near impossible to win multiple cycles, right? We saw this with Ethereum. We saw this with IOTA, right? Everybody was shooting in a million different directions back in 2017. It was about figuring out which path actually makes sense. So I think this is like important to understand like the game that we play compared to others, because we're really here for the long term. And we're really here to make this a comeback story.
All right, with us on Coinage today, the co-founder of IOTA, Dominik Schiener. Dom, good to see you, man. Thanks for coming on.
Hey, Zach, how is it going?
It's going well, man. I'm excited for this one because IOTA's been one of those projects that for as long as I've been in crypto, I have known the name. And now you guys are back with a vengeance, with relaunching the mainnet earlier this year and kind of, I guess, a lot to dig into, not just from all the way back when and what you've learned over your career building this project, but I guess kind of the new strategy now. And why don't we just start there? I mean, how have things been since kind of re-emerging, the new IOTA?
Yeah, I really like this story of re-emerging and us coming back with vengeance, because that's what this is all about, right? Like IOTA has been on the market for 10 years. So this year will be our 10-year anniversary. And I think what sets us apart to everybody else, or that to most projects in this space, is that we are really mission driven, right? We started IOTA with the vision of bringing the real world on chain, and we're still fighting for that future. And we're closer to that future than ever before, exactly because we've made some significant changes to the network. Like early in May, we finally upgraded the IOTA mainnet with Rebased, which is our new version of the protocol, right? So it made IOTA the third move layer one next to Sui, next to Aptos. So that means we really have programmability on the layer one. We can build some amazing applications. We finally introduced staking rewards for IOTA token holders as well. There it's obviously amazing to have you guys also as one of the validators. We're fully decentralized, which was one of the main criticisms of IOTA back in the old days. And we're stronger and bolder than ever, right? And so I think this is really like an amazing start of our comeback story. And so my personal objective for this year is to really march forward and to show how IOTA is paving the way to a different world in crypto, right? Where it's not just about these unsustainable Ponzi-like games, but where it's really about bringing real world adoption and real yield on chain.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, like you said, 10 years is a long time and an infinite amount of time in crypto land. But maybe we go all the way back to the beginning to think about how you got here. As everything you just said, Dom, in the way that IOTA has now kind of had time to figure out. I think everyone in crypto's had time to figure out and look at what has worked. You think about even Ethereum's upgrade to enable staking from proof of work. Like, there are things that happen along a blockchain's journey. And for you personally, I mean, going back to 2015, if I'm not mistaken, it was like 1,300 Bitcoins through an ICO that kind of kicked all this off. I mean, how different has it been to look through your eyes now in the world of crypto in 2025 versus 2015?
It's very interesting because I can confidently say that nobody back in those days thought that this space would get this big, right? And I think back then it was all about publishing crazy ideas and concepts on Bitcoin Talk Forum, ideating about it, talking about it openly, testing the ideas, and then just doing like a public sale, raising some capital and launching some tokens. And look at the industry today where it has become very professionalized, right? It matured a lot and also commercialized in that sense, right? So especially like with VCs entering the game and like perfecting their VC game, so to say, and then also institutions joining the space now. So I think for us, this is really like a very exciting time because our original vision with IOTA was really institutional adoption, right? This is why we set up IOTA as a German nonprofit foundation, because we wanted to be regulated. We wanted to be the legitimate guys. And I think especially this year with the institutional adoption really picking up steam and really marching forward, I think this is a really exciting opportunity. And so I think for me, like I've been in this space since 2011, right? So like I spent probably like nearly half of my life in this space. So it's a long time. And it's really about fulfilling that prophecy of building an alternative financial ecosystem. And I think we're really closer to that goal than ever before.
Well, I do wonder about kind of like the mission and if that's changed, because thinking back, I think that, I tied, a lot of people maybe tied IOTA to kind of like the Internet of Things back then, and maybe it was just because of the name, but like more kind of that being the focus and the size of the prize. I think this is always one of the interesting things as a crypto journalist is so many people focus on numbers. And maybe back then, I think in 2018, you guys were like the 11th biggest cryptocurrency by market cap. If you kind of fast forward to today, I think it's 93 based by coin market cap. And all these numbers, as we learned, we've covered a few of these, some of those things collapse. And so being on the list, maybe not, maybe we shouldn't put too much weight on the
Yeah.
rankings of sorts. But when it comes to the mission now, has it evolved? Because from what I've seen, a lot of building on kind of where IOTA is focusing now in Africa, as you said, being a German institute out there, not for profit, a lot going on in the EU. I mean, how have you kind of looked at maybe the branding and messaging of the new IOTA?
I think there's a lot to unfold here, right? Like, and I want to start with the message about the crypto market and the game that we play compared to others, right? I think what's kind of obvious is that crypto is a narrative driven market, right? And it's very cyclical, and it's very possible to win a singular cycle, but it's near impossible to win multiple cycles, right? We saw this with Ethereum. We saw this with IOTA, right? IOTA was the 2017 winner of that cycle. We were number 4 back then at the peak, and we were the most profitable ICO. And we really capitalized on this idea of paving the way, paving a new vision for the
Mm-hmm.
crypto market. And it really resonated well with people in 2017. Of course, then the big crash came, and then it was about rebuilding or building a more viable future, right? And this is what we have been focused on. And I can personally say, like, I only hold IOTA tokens since the founding of IOTA, so I have
Mm-hmm.
been really fully committed to this mission and making sure that we complete what we have started, right? And so of course, we've lost the market rankings, but I think if you look at all the other numbers, right, all the other metrics, we're more mature and more established than ever before, right? We have 140 full-time employees. We have 3 different entities that are actually like moving the entire IOTA ecosystem forward, and we have some really amazing partners in the real world who are helping us drive forward this adoption. As you rightfully said before, um, everybody was shooting in a million different directions back in 2017. And it was about figuring out which path actually makes sense. Where can you find product market fit? Because all these other layer ones, they're really competing for mindshare today, but what you should compete for is actually for market share, right? Real adoption. And what we have been focused on in IOTA is really focus on this vertical in international trade, right? Trade logistics, to bring that real world adoption on chain. And so we started a project in Kenya in 2019. And now we are really rolling this out in production. It already runs in production in Kenya. Now we're starting to expand it across Africa and also in Europe and the Middle East. Right. And so this is like a real world adoption use case where we're bringing data on chain, tokenizing, digitizing data, where we're
Mm-hmm.
issuing digital identities for traders. And now we're also tokenizing assets and bringing them on chain to really build up this real yield ecosystem around IOTA. And so I think this is like important to understand like the game that we play compared to others, because we're really here for the long term, and
Mm-hmm.
we're really here to make this a comeback story.
Well, I will say I don't think there's a lot of people. I mean, you mentioned kind of shifting into the Move ecosystem. We can get into there in a second, but yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of people who don't even last years or 2 years building in their own ecosystems, and so I think it is something to be said about still being here 10 years later, still keeping it going. And in terms of that, Dom, I guess, when you think about the way that some other projects, how you look at maybe the new metas, right? Because I mean, I think about what you just said, right? It's really hard to win multiple cycles. I think that's probably increasingly true. I mean, even some of the ones that are talked about now in Solana, in the way that they've kind of grown since being under $9 back when the FTX collapse happened to where they are now, and whether or not they can keep that up. I mean, I guess, as a founder in the space, now as you kind of shift into the Move ecosystem, do you kind of look at, hey, we want to be the best in this one ecosystem, or do you still just kind of say, look, we need to drive on-chain metrics? I've seen founders talk about both.
I mean, obviously, we're now the third move VM, the third move layer one next to Soy, next to Aptos, right? And so obviously, like, there's a big opportunity right now to position IOTA as one of the leaders in that specific segment, So we obviously have some amazing builders on the network. We have hackathons that we do all the time, and we see that the adoption right in the move ecosystem. But I do want to say where we differentiate with IOTA and where we really want to build up a moat, right, like a unique edge of others, is everything related to real world adoption, right? Because we have been working with all these governments and all these like institutional partners where I feel like we have a lot more credibility and a lot more trust in the market. And we can leverage that trust that we have to really build up these effective on ramps to bring these yield bearing assets on chain and then to feed them into the DeFi ecosystem that we're building. And so, for example, with our trade infrastructure, we really focus on bringing trade receivables, bringing commodities, bringing rare earth minerals, and other kind of assets on chain so they can then be part of like these DeFi marketplaces. And this is really what we want to focus on, right? Really making positioning IOTA as this real yield network that is sort of orthogonal to all these unsustainable Ponzi-like games. And I hope with that we'll also position ourselves as a more attractive network to institutional investors and traders.
Well, I mean, I was just looking through. I mean, one of the recent announcements was with the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change, and perhaps kind of tied more so back to what you're talking about there. And I do wonder. I mean, I guess there are so many different projects now, especially post Trump win, that have kind of doubled down, tripled down, or maybe completely shifted their strategy to now focus a little bit more on the U.S. And obviously, you guys being a German-based entity, I wonder if you're kind of looking at maybe some of the opportunities there to kind of lead in the EU relative to other projects who might not even be looking there. How does that maybe kind of present an opportunity for what you guys are building?
I think we have a really amazing opportunity right now because us coming to the US, like we have a very different value proposition than all the other layer ones, right? Like all the other layer ones, they sort of bring the same kind of stuff, and we actually come to the US with a solution to one of their most important problems, which is like custom clearance, which is like importing goods from other countries, and how to make sure that there is authentic goods, that there is no taxes being evaded, no tariffs being evaded, right? And so this is exactly why we have built this infrastructure on top of IOTA over the last 5 years. And so what we are doing right now is actually we're putting together some partners to start doing pilots to ship goods between the US and other countries to really showcase how IOTA can be used to solve a real world problem that the US is facing right now. And so all I can say is like we are absolutely planning our entry into the US, potentially even setting up a dedicated entity, a dedicated structure there, and also thinking about how we can tokenize some US funds and working together with some institutional financial players in the US. So I think the US is very important to us. Europe
Hmm.
is obviously a little bit lagging behind overall because of multiple reasons. But I definitely think it will have a comeback as well. But I think for us, the most important markets right now are US. We're very much focused on Africa, right? Really expanding our infrastructure there, and also in Asia, specifically in Korea, and also looking at other markets like Malaysia to see how we can support local builders there.
Yeah, and in measuring all of that too, I think that that's kind of been one of the things where, you've got strategies where some people might just kind of want to launch NFTs to show on-chain metrics, and there might be kind of that whole thing that we've seen play out multiple cycles. Like you said, each cycle is different. There's that tokenization of funds, obviously big, just to kind of boost TVL. And if you are kind of relaunching, I guess, is there one metric that kind of stands out? Is it really about bringing off-chain partners on-chain? I mean, how are you looking at the metrics in terms of benchmarking where you want to be, given, at least here in
Yeah.
the US, that we are kind of in a new chapter of getting to do things?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, right now, what we're doing is we're building two ecosystems at the same time, right? One after the other. We're launching one after the other. Like first, we're launching the DeFi ecosystem, right, where we have the DEXs, the lending protocols, the IOTA-backed stablecoins, liquid staking tokens, and all of that, right? Like this are like the base DeFi ecosystem, and of course, like there we really focus on increasing daily active users and increasing TVL, and this is where we are right now working on deploying those strategies to seed that ecosystem. But our main focus right now is really sort of this real yield ecosystem where we bring those yield bearing assets on chain and then feeding them into this DeFi ecosystem. So overall, I definitely think our metrics are to focus on the number of tokenized assets that we're bringing on chain, and ultimately all of that resonates with TVL, right? So I do think that TVL is an important metric that we're looking at as well, especially the cost of that TVL. Because if you look at other networks, they pay very expensive incentive campaigns to
Hmm.
attract that TVL. And so our objective is obviously to keep that cost to a minimum and to make sure that there's real interest in participating in that real yield. And potentially, IOTA can even be a network where liquidity is not just being recycled, like it often happens where, like token holders go from Berachain to Sonic to another network to just like
Yep.
farm the tokens. But maybe we can really be the network where we can also bring new investors, new participants on chain that want to deploy into these yield bearing structures or funds or investment opportunities because they're only possible on IOTA.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's been interesting to see most blockchains copy a lot of the same strategies, and so anytime there's someone talking about doing things differently, I think it's always exciting. And I think I just in terms of building, right, Dom, because we're also here on it's certainly not 10 years, but Coinage going on year almost 4 here in trying to
Nice.
pioneer building a community-owned show here in the U.S. I think it has been interesting to kind of try something different in paying patronage dividends back to NFT holders. But in terms of your learnings over the last 10 years, is there anything that stands out as maybe kind of like the biggest ones for you, mistakes along the way? We hear so many from different founders who are like, man, I wish I could have done something differently back then. Would have undid that. I don't know if anything stands out to you.
I mean, it's a very interesting question and a very philosophical one, right? Like the stoic version is like, if I hadn't made those mistakes, I wouldn't be here today at this position, right? So I'm grateful for all the mistakes that I've made. Of course, I've made plenty of mistakes throughout the years, and I think IOTA is really a maturation of the project, but also of me and the team. And I think that's a really amazing trajectory to look back where we came from, where we raised $500,000. We gave 100% of the token supply to the community, and we effectively bootstrapped IOTA. Right, like people have to keep in mind, we would never raise capital from investors,
Hmm.
and IOTA is really like this grassroots community project. And of course, there's a lot of egos involved. Of course, there's a lot of mistakes that we make, but the journey is all has really made it worthwhile, right? And so I'm really confident that where we stand today is our strongest position yet, so we can really march forward and create some big impact with IOTA. And I think in terms of the lessons, like the most important lesson in this market is really to be humble,
Hmm.
because what we've seen time and time again is that those that were too confident, too overconfident in their position and their opinions, they've always been sort of like slapped in the face, right? And they've been tested, proven wrong by the market. They were humbled by the market, and most of them were either liquidated because they had such a crazy position or because they were fraudsters, right? So it was important to be humble because this market changes so rapidly, and whatever is today might not be tomorrow. And so you need to be willing to be flexible and to adapt to the times, because if you don't adapt, you will die in this market, right? And this is why we were able to survive for 10 years, because we were constantly willing to change ourselves, right? Be willing to admit that we were wrong and simply change and improve, right? Because we know that we where we want to be. We don't know
Yeah.
exactly how we're going to get there, but as long as we have this drive and this persistence that we're not going to give up, I think we'll really get there.
Was there one of those decisions that maybe stands out too in terms of, changes as we've seen? If you are kind of leaning into decentralization, some of these things take time. I think back to kind of as I referenced
Yeah,
Ethereum's change. It's like some of that's not so easy to sell if you've got a whole community to convince. But moving into the move space, I feel like is a pretty big jump. I mean,
yeah.
talk to me about some of those bets, and as a founder, the conviction you need to be like, nah, this is the right way.
Yeah, with IOTA, we started this entire DAG movement, right? We invented the DAG back in 2015, and we built up an entire R&D organization around that with like really amazing people, right? We have like close to 100 people that are just doing R&D of the protocol. And over the last few years, we've obviously bet on a specific technology stream, which we called IOTA 2.0, which was basically our own ledger architecture. We wrote a lot of white papers around that, and we were very confident in the release of it. But we just also realized that we were building a protocol with a different market in mind, right? And that market was the market of 2017, where there wasn't really programmability, where there wasn't really these specific requirements of large companies that knew exactly what they needed, right? And so the decision that we made 2 years ago was to basically look at the entire space to see how we can introduce programmability to the protocol. And then when we realized that if we were to introduce programmability to IOTA 2.0, right, which is our previous protocol, it would have taken us 2 years. But if we
Hmm.
had taken out these off-the-shelf protocols, largely based off of SUI, it would have only taken us a year, right? And so it was really about weighing these decisions between time to market, right, being very quick to release this new protocol, or staying true to what we have communicated to the community for so long.
Hmm.
And so it was a very difficult decision, but ultimately we really decided that we have to be pragmatic here and be fast to update the mainnet. And instead of just competing on the technology side, where we want to compete on is really the adoption layer, because that is ultimately where the real network effects are going to happen, right? And where the real adoption happens.
Yeah.
And so obviously it was a difficult decision. We communicated it well to the community, and as we saw, there was also a token vote by the community, which was approved with large majority, and so ultimately proved to be the right decision. And so I think this was important, an important move in the history of IOTA.
Well, I think, as I mentioned, none of this is easy. Let's just throw that out there. Let's just
Yeah,
come to consensus on that. None of this is ever easy. I think, as you mentioned, two names came to mind when you were talking about hubris, and perhaps Sam and Doe are two examples in that. And again,
yeah,
some of the building here, you never really know what's going to happen. And so I think, for our community at least, it's always helpful to kind of hear the thought process. And as you mentioned, there's a lot of projects that come in these waves that have raised a lot of money from VCs, and I don't think I've read any papers kind of looking at performance versus how much is raised and if there's actually any correlation there or not. But if there is
yeah.
anything to look forward to, Dom, in terms of this next chapter, and I guess value accrual and tokenomics and things like that differentiates the new IOTA from the old IOTA. What are your expectations in terms of, I guess, where you want to see the project go next in that realm?
Yeah. Look, I see IOTA as one of the top protocols, one of the top projects in this market, right? I want to see IOTA as one of the handful of layer ones in this market that is really there to be adopted in the real world, right? Really to become a standard, to be this infrastructure on which the world is being digitized. And I'm here to win the big game. This is why I'm so relentless and still working on IOTA after this decade, because I could have also retired long ago, right? I'm not doing this for the money. I'm really doing this for the cause, because I really believe in what we're doing with IOTA. And I really believe that we have an amazing team and an amazing project that is so unique compared to all the other projects in this space. And of course, the tides were sort of turned against us because we never raised capital. We never had a large percentage of the token supply. And we obviously have all this baggage from the past, but still we fought and we changed these parameters of the project to really make us more appealing. And so I think today we're better positioned than most projects. Like, look at all of these other VC coins, all these other layer ones that sort of died because they were just in it to make a quick buck and to win a single cycle, and then the founders basically retired. Right? And
Hmm.
so what I'm really here for is to be one of the top protocols. And I think we have an amazing strategy to execute on that. And I think we have some real world adoption cases that no other layer one has in this market. And I'm sure that the price will catch up sooner than later once we also start publishing some more of the work that we've been doing, and also doing more marketing and generating more awareness for the project.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, I'd be remiss, as we mentioned off the top, if I didn't throw in that, through our Coinage Dike partnership, that of course we are validating here on IOTA for people to stake with us as well. But in that, I guess, me being selfish, being out here in New York and being in the US, you mentioned kind of accelerating plans. As someone who's out there, across the pond, looking at what's happening over here, and potentially, as you said, wanted to have an entity out here. I mean, did it catch you off guard in terms of how quickly things have changed as someone who doesn't live here, in terms of wanting to come over here? And how has your U.S. plans changed post Trump?
I think overall it's obviously very positive for the crypto space, I have to say, right? Because now there is at least no more uncertainty in many regards, and there is more of a commitment to really start to promote and support this ecosystem, right? This entire industry. So I think that's resoundingly positive. So I think for us, it definitely accelerated our plans. I think it also offered us new opportunities to start working with the government and with sort of institutional players in the US that we haven't had before. So I'm personally really excited to also spend more time in the US. Like I'm there pretty much once every 2 months at this point, either in Washington or in New York. And I see a big opportunity there. So I'm really excited to work more in the US and see how we can pave the way for this future adoption of crypto and of IOTA specifically.
All right. Well, awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I think again, as we've hosted this show, I think you technically now rank as the longest builder that's come on. 10 years, I think, has a lot of people beat. So appreciate you sticking with not just the project, but also coming on here to tell us about it, man. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Zach.